Fit check. This rant just sprang fully formed into my head all at once, so I'm just going to go for it. This is about the blurry lines between art, critique, and journalism. And it's something that it's on my mind specifically because of the fact that I've been deep diving Doechii, who is my favorite artist right now, the most inspiring artist of 2024, as I said in this big long video I made about her incredible year that she had last year. She's already having an incredible year this year, and I'm extremely excited to see how it will continue manifesting. But as I go through her catalog and her old videos, first of all, there's a level on which it's hard not to feel like a stalker or an obsessive when you're like watching YouTube videos that she made when she was in high school, which feels weird when you're thinking about it from the perspective of like, here's a musician I'm a fan of and now I'm watching their like high school videos. But Doechii was a YouTuber in high school, and her videos from back then are pretty good. They're like not the like I don't know that I would watch these videos if I wasn't already a fan of her music. Like I don't think I would naturally stumble upon them and be curious about them per se. Some of them actually, I don't know, maybe. It depends on how they would have ended up in front of me. But I feel like a sense of regret of not having seen these videos because a lot of them, like considering, I'm 33, Doechii is 26. So 10 years ago when she was making these videos, if I had heard some of these messages, I think it would have like affected my perspective in ways, when I was younger, that would have helped me to mature faster. Doechii legitimately was like much more mature at a much younger age than I was. Ultimately, she's a year older than my husband, who I also think is more mature than me in a lot of ways. We both have we both have more perspective into certain things, but we also share that with one another enough that we've kind of now been maturing together. So, I feel like this sense that if you are somebody who ever had a Doechii in your life, if you had this channel, if you ever encountered her, if you were ever a fan of her, it would have been a tremendous effect on you. No matter when you discovered Doechii, if you discovered her 10 years ago, there's a high chance she was going to become one of your favorite artists and that you are still a fan now. Unless you've been jilted somehow, along the way, because we've all got jilted fans. At the core, Doechii has always had like intense fans because she has always made intensely like honest art. Now, if I want to go about expressing my appreciation of Doechii's art, what is the most effective way for me to do that? Like, I don't think I could copy her fashion sense per se. I mean, I also am pretty androgynous, but I'm more of like a hiker fashion type thing. I mean, I certainly take inspiration from the way that she carries herself. I would say the way that she just the way she moves about the world is very inspiring to me. Um, we are Leos from the same week. My birthday is 6 days before hers. So in the year, I was born in 1991. So like, there are certain things that like behavioral patterns that are just very similar, but she has a tendency to be way more forthright than I am. And I think that comes from a place of earned self-righteousness, that like when I watch Doechii's old videos, she is like the most woke person there is, like in terms of like social politics. She had like an uncanny level of perspective, and not just her but the people around her as well. Like it's obvious that she was in an environment where people were really educating themselves about the world as much as possible and trying to reach the highest level of expression they could. It was like, it feels like she has always been in an overachiever environment, like an environment of people who have been pushed and pressured to do their best, to represent themselves at their best, and that is what they value, and that is what they're trying to put forward into the world. And in that way, we are almost opposites, in that I kind of stand for being like a slovenly, dissociative, slave to the system of addiction. But Doechii said, I think I could find a way through that. And so that's inspiring as well, do I think you should be more like me or more like Doechii? I think you should be more like Doechii. If I think that you should be more like Doechii than you should be like me, then how do I express what about her do I think is so great? Obviously my preference would be, well, you just also listen to Doechii, like you could listen to both of us. But I realize that there's going to be a gap in understanding, because you're not going to see the same thing I see when you look at her. Like, I have to explain to you what I'm seeing if I want you to understand what I'm getting out of the experience. Like, it could be that we could both watch the same video and get very different things out of it. But I think that if we communicate our understandings to one another, they'll get closer together, And I think it's especially, different people have different approaches to how they consume art. I'm way more creator focused than I am project focused, in a way where, like, this isn't me saying that, like, Doechii has no skips or anything like that, like no songs that I think are, like, just not to my taste. But I would go out of my way to find that out. And I would actually go out of my way to try to listen to those songs multiple times and at least make sure I understand what the song is, because I care about the artist. Like Coheed and Cambria, they have a ton of songs at this point that I don't really like, but I've given all of their albums a listen through, and, like, tried to understand what was being said, and even if I don't like it, at least I get why it exists, So, like, with Doechii, even if I don't like every single song or every single video, I always understand why it's there, and it adds to my understanding of her as a person, because I look at art in terms of who is the person, and that tends to fall more into the journalistic and critical realm. Like, if you're like, let's say, okay, Doechii expressing her appreciation for Missy Elliott, for instance. If you listen to Doechii's music, you hear Missy Elliott's influence. If you know Missy Elliott's music, and you know that Doechii is a fan of her, and then you hear a song like, I think Pencil Pouch is what it's called. That one is, like, the most obvious Missy Elliott song to me, They also collaborated together on the song Trampoline. So, like, I don't know that they were in the same room for that collaboration or anything. I just know they were both on the same song. So, like, the influence is obvious there. And if I wanted to express being influenced by Doechii through music, I would just use one of her flows or an inflection, or make a reference to one of her bars. I've done this before, actually. She had the line, I'm a dying sunflower leaving a trail of seeds in the 813, that's my legacy. And I have a weeping willow, spooky and impressive, spreading millimeter seeds over East Coast, Mid-South to SoCal flights. United States, I've caught you dead to rights. I wrote that in reflection of that bar. Probably not obvious unless I say it, but, like, that's a low-key level of doing a deliberate, influential reference. It's a seed, we're both plants spreading seeds across the places we travel. That is the point of the bar. So, then there's the level of, okay, well, I'm also an art critic. So I can go into her bars and analyze the bars and talk about what the bars mean, right? And that's what she has said she wants. Like, if you watch enough interviews, you know, she's talked multiple times about, particularly on the Joe Budden podcast, she brought this up. Like, I want people to go into the bars and analyze the specific bars and break down the double entendres and stuff like that. And Budden was just like, nobody does that. These people don't even understand the double and triple entendres. And, well, that's where I get into the journalistic aspect too, right? Because if I'm going to break down every single lyric and what it means, do you want me to talk about what I think it means, like, literally? Because there's all the figurative layers of the emotional expression that we can talk about, but you also publicized most of your life in vlogs, you know? And, like, it wouldn't be that hard to put together that information. But also, Doechii has taken down some of her songs. She's changed some of the names of things. She doesn't release a tremendous amount of her content, you know? There's one interview I found where she said that there were over 100, perhaps as many as 200 songs recorded in the process of creating Alligator Bites Never Heal, meaning that she whittled down from at least 150 songs down to the, like, less than 20 that are on the album. That's crazy. That's so many songs, you know? Like, being a long-time listener of rock music, it's not too unusual for rock bands to record like 3 albums worth of material and throw most of it away. Sometimes they get too big for their britches and you get a Stadium Arcadium double album where it really didn't need to be a double album. There's one album's worth of great songs on that. Maybe great is a strong word. But you know, or Uno Dos Tres from Green Day, like, sometimes they just are like, fuck it, we're gonna give them all the songs and let them decide which ones are the good ones. And Doechii does not take that approach. Doechii does not take that approach at all. Drake has been taking that approach for the last 10 years or so. You know, like, a lot of artists have kind of switched over. Playboi Carti, you know, they've switched over to this. Just dump all of it and let them figure out what's listenable, you know? Doechii does not want you to hear her random therapy sessions if they're not good songs. Like, and she's been very clear that art is mostly therapy for her. It's mostly about sorting through her feelings, getting something out, you know? And so if it's good therapy, it doesn't always mean it's a good art product, you know? Now, having said that, I think Doechii's scraps are probably better than a lot of people's whole projects, you know? I think that her hardcore fans probably would appreciate every single one of those songs. I'm sure there's a vault somewhere. I'm sure there's a slow drip plan for when she's dead, you know? Like, I don't know if this is something labels set up right when you sign up, but I assume, given how young artists tend to die, that right when you sign up, they probably come up with a plan for how they're gonna release all your extra shit posthumously. And also whether or not you're even allowed to, like, turn on a microphone in another studio and that kind of shit, you know? I'm fascinated as well by the way that Doechii speaks to herself across time, and this is something that I was doing by accident for a long time, and then, like, picked up on it in my 20s and started realizing, like, that I have to start, like, living like I'm in the movie Arrival. If you have a vision of a future in your head, you have to operate towards the ends of realizing that future as though it is a foregone conclusion. And so you have to, you know, be able to hear the voice of the future. And oftentimes, to understand the voice of the future, you need to decode the past, because that's where all the language was built. And so, you know, as I go through Doechii's old videos, I can understand the language of her present tense. But I also wonder how much is... I mean, if it's still available, especially on her channel or her SoundCloud, I assume she's not hiding it, you know? Like, if it's still there, it's because she still vouches for this content, because she has taken other things down. But I also know that some of the stuff she's taken down is available. So that's, again, where I get into the journalistic aspect. And there's a journalistic responsibility, too, where, like, I'm not trying to, like, create any problems for the artist, you know, emotionally or on a social or legal level. You know, when it comes to rap, especially, a lot of the time, the reason we don't want to do analysis on these bars is we're like, oh, I don't know, do I want to talk about the crime this person is saying they're admitting to? Because I could go collect tweets from that night and figure out where they were and what was happening, you know? Like, investigative journalism is basically being a detective. You know, how much journalistic responsibility do I have towards that kind of accuracy? Ultimately, I care more about Doechii than I do about, you know, I'm not trying to make a ton of money. I'm not trying to spread some kind of truth or whatever, you know, like whatever abstract notion of like, I have to tell as much of the truth as I have discovered. Like, I'm not as concerned about that as I am about literally just sharing what makes this artist great and, you know, protecting her as much as possible. So again, I think that if she really was like, don't look at anything I made before a certain point, that stuff wouldn't be there, you know? But at the same time, the stuff that she has erased, I kind of am like, I don't think I should touch that because, you know, I don't know why it's out. I don't know why the information is available to me, but I suspect that it's in spite of her, you know? And I don't want to operate in spite of Doechii. That's not the point of this. So to me, there's an innate blurring between, if I talk about Doechii, it's not going to be raw journalism. It's not going to be raw critique either, because my goal, again, is not to find a flaw. It's to express how I feel about her. So ultimately, it's art. Art in the form of journalistic critique as an aesthetic. Like, journalistic critique is the aesthetic of my art, but it is just art. It is like, to me, what I do is on the level of novelization. It's just a very gritty, realistic novel, you know? I'm like the Wire of YouTubers. It's like, it's just a show, but people talk about it like it happened, you know?